Hello, everyone. Welcome to this workshop for MSCA Skłodowska-Curie Individual Fellows, a practical guide. The event is organized under the umbrella of the second Latin American MCAA conference, where MCAA stands for the MSCA Curie Alumni Association. My name is Charlotte, and together with my colleague Victoria, we are the two coordinators of Your Access in Latin America and the Caribbean. This workshop is for researchers from all over the world who were awarded a MSCA Skłodowska-Curie individual fellowship in one of the last calls and wonder how to implement it. It is also meant for curious researchers and candidates interested in career development and looking for practical information on the MSCA postdoctoral fellowship. This event was conceived by Gledson and Midio, who's a postdoctoral researchers at Embrapa, the Brazilian Agricultural Research Corporation. And Gledson is also the chair of the Brazilian chapter of MCAA. Gledson is coordinating the organization of this conference on behalf of his colleagues from the Brazilian, Argentinian, and Chilean chapters of the Alumni Association. And I want to congratulate him and thank him publicly for the extraordinary job that he did so far. Well, Gledson noticed that if we want to be useful to the fellows, we have to continue supporting them even after they are awarded an individual fellowship. First, you surely have many questions on how to organize your work from know-how and also on the administrative procedures. Am I right? So that's what we are going to talk in a minute with Branwen Hyde. And I thank her for her participation. But we also wanted to bring the topic of career development with Brian Cahill, as this is highly relevant for researchers as you who are about to start a next step in their career. All these topics are also relevant for prospective candidates, and we hope you make good use of them to submit a successful project in the 2021 call. Well, without any further delay, I would like to invite Lucy Swan for a welcoming remarks. Lucy is the deputy head of the unit dealing with MSCA at the European Commission. Lucy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me and can you see me?
We can hear you and see you.
Okay, good, because I had a little problem with my phone, with my computer, so I'm connecting from my phone. So thank you very much, Charlotte. And on behalf of the European Commission, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the world of MSCA. I'd like to warmly congratulate those among you who have been selected for funding after a very tough competition. And I wish you all the best for the finalization of your grant agreements and the start of your projects. As you probably already know, following this year's call for individual fellowships, which is the last one under Horizon 2020, 1,630 researchers have succeeded and were selected to be funded from over 11,600 proposals that were evaluated. Of these, I'm pleased to say there are 95 researchers and 7 participating organizations from Latin America and the Caribbean. Your projects will foster excellence and enhance international, intersectoral and interdisciplinary exposure. But in a broader sense, they will also contribute to building a true European research area, a space where scientists, academia, industry and policymakers can cooperate and innovate. This is all the more important today when faced with the challenges like the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID crisis has highlighted the critical need to provide researchers with the right skills and to facilitate their outreach and networking. The crisis has also highlighted the need for international collaboration in research. As talents cooperating across borders can greatly benefit from an easier access to scientific data, it's crucial to further promote open science within and beyond Europe. And that's what we'll be doing also further with the new programme. Despite being a bottom-up programme, the MSCA contributes significantly to addressing global challenges such as the green and digital transitions, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the EU-focused initiatives with global importance such as the EU Cancer Action Plan. This year we'll continue the organisation of what we call the cluster events, which bring together excellent MSCA projects and researchers, as well as other relevant stakeholders to network, share best practice and reach out to policymakers. This year, we are organising 2 such events, one focusing on cancer, which is actually taking place today and tomorrow, and one focusing on the European Green Deal, which will be in July. And these show how research carried out in MSCA projects can directly feed into EU policymaking. Now, besides feedback to policymakers, MSCA projects and fellows are also encouraged to communicate with the general public. That's a really important aspect of the MSCA. And it's important not only to maintain transparency of public funding, but also to raise awareness and interest and show the impact of your work for society and citizens. You've already been informed, I think, a couple of days ago by my colleague Boriana Yotova about what the MSCA will look like under Horizon Europe. So I won't repeat in detail what she said, but I would like to highlight a few of the main aspects. Since the MSCA are very successful, our main aim is not to change everything, but rather to ensure continuity. So we've maintained the 4 main actions, with some small changes related largely to simplification and making the programme more attractive to newcomers. We're also developing guidelines on supervision to ensure that researchers are supported and can get the most out of their fellowships. And efforts will also be made to make the programme more sustainable and to reduce the environmental impact of research activities. We're developing an MSCA Green Charter for that purpose. Now, as regards the individual fellowships, they will be renamed postdoctoral fellowships. The action will remain very similar to the existing format, providing opportunities for researchers to pursue European and global fellowships. Among the planned changes, there are proposals to better focus the target groups of the action. So to focus mainly on researchers in possession of a PhD and with up to 8 years of research experience after their PhD. And here, of course, we'll make exceptions for maternity leave, years spent outside of research, or years of research spent in 3rd countries for those researchers who want to return to Europe. Another novelty is the possibility for fellows to benefit from an additional period of up to 6 months to work in the non-academic sector, for example, industry, SMEs, public institutions, established in an EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country. And finally, efforts have been made to build synergies with other EU programmes. In particular, we'll be for the first time opening up the MSCA fellowships to research areas supported by the Euratom Research and Training Programme. So that's another novelty. So our aim broadly is to launch the new MSCA work programme and the related calls in May this year. And the postdoctoral fellowships will be one of the first actions to be launched. We expect deadlines for applications to be around the middle of September. And a very important point for those among you who will be interested in applying for this coming year's call, a guide for applicant will be published at the same time as the calls. And this is a very important document to help you prepare your applications. For those of you who are interested in getting more information about the MSCA under Horizon Europe, we will be organising an information event on Tuesday next week. So you're all very welcome to join through our MSCA website. I think Charlotte can provide the link in the chat if possible. The timing is not ideal for those of you based in South America, since it's in the morning for Europe. So, but you can watch a replay of it on our website. So this event should give you further information on all the different actions and the different features. So to conclude, I'd like to wish our successful fellows all the best in the implementation of their projects. I would also like to warmly encourage those of you who may be considering applying for the next call to do so. And finally, I would also like to warmly thank Euraccess and the MSCA National Contact Points. I cannot underline enough the importance of your role, not only for the support and help that you provide to applicants, but also for your valuable outreach to countries all over the world. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best for very fruitful discussions today.
Thank you very much, Lucy. We have indeed people in the audience from many countries in Europe, in Europe and beyond, many countries worldwide, from China to Latin America. Welcome all. This is my pleasure to invite now Bronwyn Hyde from the UK Research Office, UCRO, in Brussels, where she is one of the 2 UK MSCA national contact points.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm hoping that there's been no issue with sharing of my screen. If there are any issues, just let me know.
We can see it perfectly.
Excellent. So thank you, as I said, very much for inviting me today. I am one of the 2 UK NCPs, but beyond that, I've actually had experience with project managing MSCA Curie, and I've been involved in MSCA Curie since FP7 in one form or the other through supporting. And I have to admit, I think it's an excellent program. And so I congratulate all of you for being involved. And for those of you who have not applied yet and who are thinking about it, I would also really echo Lucy's comments of it being an excellent opportunity and encouraging you to be involved in the MSCA Curie schemes. I've seen that they can very excellent opportunities for young researchers. So this session is to kind of go over some of the practical points that you do need to be aware of when implementing your project. So really focusing on those who have been awarded, but it's also useful information for those who will be thinking about applying for the next call. And just a little bit to say that we are based in Brussels, and we have, as an organization, have been based in Brussels for over 35 years now, close to 37. And our job is to really support the engagement in EU-funded activities, and that includes MSCA Curie and ERC and other opportunities within European funding. But really to kind of focus on MSCA Curie individual fellowships, and I really want to start on the importance of kind of communicating and knowing who are the right people to go to for support and guidance. We often get queries from young researchers because they're not clear on kind of basic elements, but often they are internal elements and they're just really unclear. So I really want to talk about how important it is to make sure that you have very good communication within your organization and with an external contact. So within your organization, obviously the most important contact that you really should be having good communication and regular communication with is your supervisor. But also kind of beyond just the supervisor, making sure to have good communication at a departmental level. So this might be department administrators, other colleagues, other support staff, researchers within your unit or university, depending on how your organization is set up. Or for those of you not in academic organizations, equally, they will have different support structures internally and administrative support that will help you to navigate the internal policies and how things work within your organization. And also in terms of the requirement of mobility, also to help you to navigate some of the issues revolving around mobility, such as getting bank accounts, identifying housing, understanding the new culture that you are going to be moving to and helping you to integrate into that environment. Many universities particularly have dedicated research support teams, often specializing in European funding opportunities, who will also be able to help you navigate the world of European funding, so the rules and obligations that you have with regards to the MSCA Skłodowska-Curie actions, but also internal policies that you'll also need to comply with during the duration of your fellowship. A key group of that to actually get to know very well is the finance team. They will help you with the financial management of your project, i.e. how much money that you have to spend on all the wonderful research and training opportunities that your fellowship provide for you. It's also really important to speak with and get to know your human resources, so your HR and or payroll teams. A lot of questions that we get do relate to HR and payroll, so salary and allowances, and I will go through that. But it's really important that if you do ever have questions on those, that you go to your HR and payroll teams in the first instance, as they will really be able to explain how it all works according to the country and to the organ you are in and to the organization to which is employing you. And within that, there will probably a wide range of other kind of members of staff that you can also would benefit to kind of contact. Some institutions, particularly if they have a large number of MSCA Curie projects, might have dedicated kind of Marie Curie networking groups and activities. They might have specific centers or activities for international students and international researchers. And again, it's worthwhile identifying those and to becoming involved in those networks to really help you feel at home within the environment that you're in. They're also going to be able to help with a lot of questions that you might have with regards to how the organization to which you're employed functions and kind of the area of which you're living. You know, even simple things of where to go out for a meal or things of those things, anything that can again help you feel more comfortable in the environment and feel more at home during your fellowship. In terms of external from the organization, I would encourage all of you to contact your MSCA Curie NCPs. And there's the link for the Net4 Mobility project, which is an umbrella project that brings all of the MSCA Curie NCPs together and provides additional training and resources, both at the application, but equally during project implementation phase. And it's a really good source of information. And obviously, you'll be hearing about the Marie Curie alumni after, but I would encourage you to get involved with them and to follow them as well. And another key contact, though often you might have very little to do as a fellow with them on a regular basis, is actually your project officer based within the research executive agency within the commission. They have the responsibility to oversee your project and are really there to help you to be successful during the running of your fellowship. It's really important that you and the host organization have an open communication with them and alert them to any changes that might be occurring either in the research and training objectives that you're undertaking as part of the funded project, but equally any personal changes to your circumstance that might negatively or positively impact the running of that project. And letting them know early, particularly if it's something that might be slightly more problematic, you can work together to come up with a solution to overcoming that issue. They are very, very experienced. Most of them have been doing this for a very long time and have pretty much seen anything and everything that will arise during the course of project implementation and are really there to support you, as I said, and to make sure that you are successful during your fellowship. So don't leave it to the last minute to talk to them, I think is what I'm trying to say. So within that, there are a number of specific obligations that both you as a fellow, but also your host organization who has signed a legally binding contract with the commission need to comply with. And I'm just going to go over a few of those obligations for both the host organization and the fellow, you as the fellows as well. The first one is that the host organization has the obligation to ensure that you are appointed as a fellow under an employment contract that has full Social Security coverage, which includes but is not limited to pension rights. This also includes things such as leave for sickness or illness and parental leave. The full extent of that coverage will often depend on the organization and what they would normally offer their staff members. If they are unable to offer you a direct employment contract, then it needs to be some other direct contract with equivalent benefits to an employment contract. And if you need to be seen as being equal to any member of staff, and you need to have all the same rights and obligations as any other member of staff has within that organization, or better. In very exceptional cases, where national law does prohibit the possibility of employing the fellows directly through either an employment contract or another direct contract, then there is an option for a fixed fellowship. And this has some slightly different obligations in terms of the salary threshold that's provided. I will go through the allowances, but I will really be looking at the more normal general case where someone is employed under a direct contract or full employment contract. In addition to ensuring that the employment contract provides full Social Security coverage, you should also have very clearly outlined in your contract your financial entitlements, i.e. how much you will be going to be paid, how that payment structure works, what the deductions will be, what is your starting date of your fellowship, how long your fellowship will last for, the name of your supervisor, and any other arrangements particularly related to the ownership of the results of your project, i.e. intellectual property rights. And these are the minimum kind of requirements that would be expected from your contract. And if your contract does not include these elements, then you can go back to your employee and ask for additional clarification for them to be added in or provided as a supplementary annex or documentation to support your employment contract. The organization should also be supporting the development of your personal career development plan. And I know that there's a specific session with Brian on this later, but just to say that this is an obligation and it should be developed jointly between yourself and your supervisor and updated as necessary during the course of your fellowship. And it's also important for you as a fellow to kind of keep track of this to make sure you are developing your career, because that is one of the key aims of your fellowship, is about career development. The host organization should also make sure that you actually receive a copy of the grant agreement. So this is a legally binding agreement that is signed by the commission and your host beneficiary. This outlines what you are expected to do in terms of your research and training. It also sets out all the obligations as well as all the allowances that both you and the host organization have. And it's important that you actually have a copy of this so that you understand what your obligations are and what the obligations of your organization have towards you as well. You should also get a copy of the charter, what we call the Charter and Code, which is a European Charter for researchers, and the Code and Conduct for the recruitment of researchers. And you should also, the host organizations needs to ensure that you have all the other necessary resources to implement the project, either within that organization or you have access to them through things like secondments, research visits, and short stays as outlined in your proposal, which gets translated into the grant agreement. As an individual fellow yourself, you do have some obligations. And the first one, which is incredibly important, is to make sure that you is very clearly visible on any of the outputs that you are producing. This could be journal articles, PowerPoint presentations, short video clips, any kind of output that this project is being funded through the European Commission. And there's a specific line in the grant agreement actually that you need to use in order to make the funding visible. And I've just included the text here. If you're wondering what the grant agreement number is, again, your host institution can help you with this, but it's a specific number that will be on the grant agreement, which generally is actually the proposal number that you had when you submitted your project. You also must comply with the obligations regarding the publishing of open access to scientific publications and to research data. And if you've got questions about open access, about what journals would meet the requirements, what are the specific requirements with regards to open access for Horizon 2020, I would encourage you to speak with the library at your organization. If you're outside of academia, and particularly if you're in a small SME who may not have these support services, this is where the national contact points can really be helpful in providing you with the additional resources and information with regards to open science, and point you in to the direction of some other resources to help you comply with those obligations. You must work exclusively for the action unless you have part-time working has been agreed with your project officer. In effect, you need to be working 100% of your time on the project as outlined in your grant agreement. And so if you are wanting to apply for additional funding at the same time, it's really important that you discuss this with your supervisor and possibly with your project officer in advance to understand if those are actually compatible with the part-time working arrangements. But in general, the expectation is 100% of your time on the project for the duration of that project, which for European fellowship would be, generally speaking, is 24 months. And generally speaking, for a global fellow, it's 36 months. You really do need to undertake the project as outlined in your proposal, which is detailed in the grant agreement. There is the recognition that things will change over the course of your project. And if there's small minor changes, that's usually not a problem. But if there's going to be large changes to the project, this needs to be discussed with the project officer and obviously your supervisor as well. And this may require some actual technical amendments to the grant agreement to take account of those changes. It's not to say that those changes can't happen, it's just there's some procedures that need to be put in place to ensure the support for those are in place. But also this means that you are the one expected to do the work in the proposal. And so again, it's really important if situations arise where it seems that you're no longer able to do the work as you put into the proposal as outlined in your grant agreement, that you speak to your supervisor and your host organization about this as soon as possible. And it may then require some further discussions with the project officer. You also have the obligation as a fellow to inform the host and your supervisor as soon as possible if there's anything that happens that would change, any events, circumstances, or changes that would ultimately affect your ability to undertake your fellowship, even if only for a short period of time. As I said, your project officer and your supervisor are there to support you and help you through all of this, and they, will support you with any of these changes that have might come up. But it's important that they know in advance, because it's much easier to support you if they know earlier than if they're to find out after the fact, where it becomes much more difficult to support you with those situations that may have arisen. The big question that we get, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, are about the allowances and how do the allowances work. Now, what I'm going to be showing you is a general case. There will be some very specific, and I'll talk about them, country differences, particularly in terms of things like the correction coefficient and how payments are made. And this is particularly thinking of the UK, where they receive the funding in euros, but we then actually, the salary is paid in pounds, and the way that that is dealt with. So this is the general allowances as outlined in the guide for applicants. For the living allowance, this will have the correction coefficient applied according to the country of which your host organization is based in. If you have a global fellow, you will have two different country coefficients, one for the outgoing phase and then a final for the return phase back into your EU member state or associated country. What is really, really important to understand is that the living allowance listed here is the gross amount and will be subject to all national deductions. Depending on how your host organization then includes the mobility, and if you are eligible for the family allowance, they could choose so that all the research unit costs could potentially be subject to taxation. This will often depend on how this is set up at an organizational level, but equally it depends on member states where certain national legislation may actually play a part in how this is dealt with. The mobility allowance can be paid based on receipts. So some organization will actually retain the mobility allowance and then pay it out on receipts. And this is often a way of overcoming any issues of taxation. They will still need to be able to you as the fellow actually receive the full amount of that mobility allowance. The host organization has the obligation to ensure that you do receive the full amount of the researcher unit cost to which you are entitled. And this is just a little bit of an example of how the salary is calculated. I have used a UK example, and for that meaning I've used the UK country correction coefficient. Just to reiterate again that the living allowance is the gross amount. So this is the net salary, therefore results from deducting all the compulsory that could be employer and employee social security contributions, as well as any direct taxes, for example, income tax from the gross amount. As I said, the types of deductions will depend. There are also often national legislation which will dictate the amount and the types of deductions. But within that, depending on the member states, there is some flexibility that the organizations have with regards to how they would want to deal with the contributions. For example, whether they would charge both the employer and the employee contributions. So you might find that even within one member state, one organization would deduct both the employer and the employee contributions, and others it might only be the employee contributions that are deducted. The mobility and family allowances are fixed amount regardless of the country of recruitment, and as I said, it can be subject to the tax laws of that country of recruitment depending on how they are paid out. So the researcher unit costs must be fully used for the benefit of the researcher, i.e. the researcher must receive the full amount of the living, mobility, and family allowance to which they are entitled. Your family status would have been determined at the date of the call deadline, and unfortunately it cannot be revised during the lifetime of the project, even if your family situation changes. As a researcher, as I've already said, you must be recruited on a full employment contract. And just to reiterate that the research unit costs given are the gross amounts from which both the employer and the employee statutory deductions can be made. And I would strongly encourage and advise you to talk to your host institution, if you have not done so already, about how the salary will be calculated. What taxes, what are the compulsory deductions? How will they be made? How will any kind of adjustment payments be made, if any are required? If you are being paid in a currency that is not in euros, how that exchange rate will be dealt with, how it will be monitored over the lifetime of your project, and how any payments will be made. For example, if you are unfortunately as a result of any exchange rate losses underpaid, and or if they would make any adjustment requirements from you, if as a result of those exchange rate fluctuations you are in effect overpaid. And it's important that you get that information as soon as possible. As I said, it should be outlined in your contract. And if it's not outlined in your contract, then I would encourage you to go back to your employer and ask them for the clarification. This is one of the number one questions that we get through the help desk from new fellows as to how this is calculated. Often we get those questions quite late into the running of the project, which makes it much more difficult to address and to rectify going forward. With regards to institutional costs, so these are the research, training and networking, and management and indirect costs. The research and training and networking unit cost covers the cost for all training and networking activities that directly contribute to your career development. And this really depends on your needs. And this is also why the career development plan is so crucial. It really, as I said, depends on your needs and on the needs of your research and training project. This could include the cost of participating in conferences, trips related to research work that needs to be done to support the undertaking of the action, training courses, it could be language courses, attending at seminars, lab material, maybe you need to buy some books or have access to civic library records or publication costs. And the list can go on and on and on. It really depends, as I said, on your needs. There's no definition of what actually can be included under this. And it's quite nice that the Commission actually give a lot of flexibility as to what can be covered under this title of research and training and networking costs. They also includes the cost for any specific research expenses and professional costs, such as the cost for visas and travel expenses for secondment and or short research trips and visits. And as I said, the costs related to secondments. The management and indirect costs are the costs incurred, basically are used by the university or the organization that is hosting you to cover the general costs which they will incur, connected to the organizing and implementing of, say, the secondments, but also kind of logistics of employing you. So administrative, financial management, logistics, ethics, human resources, and legal advice. And again, there's a lot of flexibility given into what can be covered by management and indirect costs. Some institutions will use the management and indirect costs to help to supplement things like the salary of fellows, or to offset any additional research and training and networking costs that might incur during the running of the project, or if you're going on secondment, can be used to support the costs at that seconding organization or the organization that's hosting you for a research trip. So again, there's a lot of freedom and flexibility given. And so it's really important to have that dialogue with your host organization as to the possible or not possible access to these funds. And it will really vary. Even within a single organization, you might find that between departments, the way that these management and indirect costs are utilized will vary. It's also important for both the research and training and networking costs and the management and indirect costs to understand that they are managed by the host according to their own internal policies. So you need to follow internal policies when booking things like travel or purchasing equipment. And I also want to specifically mention purchasing equipment. It's very important if you are purchasing equipment, such as a laptop, for instance, that you have early discussions with that host institution as to who owns that piece of equipment. I recognize that this is your fellowship, but the grant agreement is between the commission and the host organization. The funding, particularly for the research training and networking and management and indirect costs, is managed by the host institution. And most institutions have an internal policy that any equipment that is purchased through them, it becomes owned by them. And therefore, they will often be in the right to ask for that piece of equipment back when your fellowship ends. So it's important to discuss that with them very early on. Again, this will vary according to organization, and also we can see this vary between school centers and departments within single organizations. Because of the flexibility that's provided within BIREA, which is very good, there is no specific guidelines on this. It is about following internal policy. In terms of your reporting requirements, out of all of the European funding, Marie Curie is quite light touch in terms of reporting. With at the end of your reporting period, generally one reporting period for Marie Curie Fellows, you will need to do a periodic report and a final report. And the final report should include a summary for publication of the work that you have undertaken. Effectively, think of it as a little abstract of your work. But you are required, and this is an obligation, in addition to the periodic and final report, to submit an evaluation questionnaire and a follow-up questionnaire at the end of your fellowship and 2 years after the end of your fellowship. So it's really important that your host organization has the most up-to-date contact details for you. And this is just a little screenshot of what the evaluation questionnaire looks at. It's very straightforward. It should not take very long to answer, but it is really important that you do so. And very recently, the Commission actually published the results of the latest follow-up questionnaires, and you can actually see the results. And in general, fellows are very happy and have high satisfaction with the time spent on their fellowship. But this is an obligation, so it's really important that you do make sure that your host organization has the correct details for you at the end of your fellowship. I also just wanted to quickly highlight the special needs lump sum. So for Under Horizon 2020, this is a separate grant that provides financial support for the additional cost entailed by recruited researchers with disabilities whose long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment is such that it would make it more difficult for them to participate in the Marie Curie project. There's no definition of what is a disability, and the only requirement is that if requested, you can provide a medical certificate to support the fact that you do have a disability. This could also be something that was diagnosed during your fellowship, and we've seen that on a number of occasions. It is a lump sum fund for up to 60,000 euros per recruited researcher, and it will cover up to 100% of the eligible costs. It is submitted as a separate application with support by your beneficiary, but it must be linked to the original Marie Curie grant. So only current Marie Curie grant holders can apply, and you would apply for this after, now that you have been in receipt of your Marie Curie individual fellowship. And if this is something that you might be interested in finding out more about or possibly applying for in this year, then I would encourage you to speak to your project officer about the details of when the next cutoff will be. And I would highly encourage you to take advantage of this if you do meet the criteria for this funding. And just a few little key things to remind you about as you embark on your fellowship is to read your contract. And if you don't understand something, please ask. Ask your HR, ask your supervisor, whoever is the correct person to ask with regards to your question. It's really important that you understand the terms of your contract. Make sure you understand the obligations that are outlined in the grant agreement, to which you should have received a copy from your host institution. And if you have not, you can ask for one, and I would encourage you to do so, as they should be providing you with a copy. Make sure you do have a career development plan and that it is followed. So again, it is followed and updated as necessary. Make sure you are aware of all the relevant internal policies. And if, again, you're not sure what they are, ask your supervisor, ask other people within your research department. If you think that there is something that was supposed to be in your original contract, but it wasn't, or it isn't, then I will again ask for clarification. And really, please be aware that there are very often departmental, institutional, and country differences. And though I would encourage you to talk to and be other Marie Curie fellows, you will find, we get this quite really regularly, that there are quite significant differences in the way that many things are handled with returns to particularly the allowances and the running of the projects. So please understand that when you are speaking to fellows, particularly if they are in different countries or in different institutions, even within the same country. I would encourage you to join the Marie Curie alumni and take full advantage of the opportunities that are presented through being a Marie Curie fellow. Have really good communications with your host institution and your supervisor or supervisors, depending on the type of fellowship and how it has been set up. Remember that the training elements are just as important of the research. It's really easy to put your head down and just get on with the really exciting research as in your proposal. Do not forget that training is just as important as the research. And most importantly, enjoy the time that you are a Marie Curie fellow. Really enjoy your fellowship. And as I said, all the different opportunities and advantages that being a Marie Curie fellow provides you. And that is everything that I wanted to cover. I've included a number of resources, some information packs, which again, you should also be receiving from your host institution, but if not, they are available on the Marie Curie website. And also a link to the annotated model grant agreement and the EURAXESS portal. Within the, not only is it the general portal, but as I'm sure you are already aware, there's also different country portals within the EURAXESS main site, which also cover a number of issues related to mobility, such as taxation and visa requirements. And I would encourage you to have a look. And then also the link for the Marie Curie NCPs. And just to say that I am around, so if I think there's been some questions, so I will look at the Q&A after and answer those in writing throughout the rest of the morning, I guess, in Brazil. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Brenwen. For sure, you have already many questions waiting for you in the Q&A section. So if you have questions, please type them not in the chat, but in the Q&A session. Brenwen nicely agreed to answer some of them in writing. Maybe we won't have to address all of them, but you already heard a very good panorama of the starting questions and how to solve them. Also, you have many contacts already of people you can refer to in the future. Now it's my turn to tell you what EURAXESS can do for you. And EURAXESS actually is a European Commission initiative to support the mobility of researchers and their career development. So how we do that? How do we support researchers interested in a stay in Europe? Providing information, and I will detail them in a minute, but it's also important to say what we don't do. EURAXESS doesn't fund mobility. We are talking today about the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, but the European Commission also funds individual researchers through the European Research Council, for example, the ERC. So there are plenty of opportunities, and we will help you always try to identify them. Let me show what EURAXESS can do. To help researchers with their mobility projects, EURAXESS offers 5 main tools that are accessible from its main portal and that I'm sharing on your screen now. Am I sharing? Yes, I hope so. I would say that the most relevant pillar for those of you who are about to start their mobility, and as Brenwen mentioned it already, it's the information and assistance pillar. Our colleagues are
your screen.
Sorry, you cannot?
No.
Ah.
I only see you as your video.
Now you can, right?
Perfect,
So
thank you.
Here, thank you, Victoria. This is the EURAXESS portal I was talking about with its 5 pillars to support you. The most important for you about to cross the oceans or to go to Europe to start your mobility is the information and assistance pillar, with our colleagues in Europe helping researchers and their families organizing their relocation and arrival in the new country. So there are 600 Euraccess offices all over Europe. And our colleagues deal with a variety of topics, such as Brenwen said, taxation, but also visa, housing, social security, dual careers, to help you prepare your arrival with your family. Each of the 42 countries participating in Euraccess has its own Euraccess portal. You can access the list here on the national portal and find each website for each country. So our colleagues in Europe, they speak the local language. They deal with welcoming researchers on a daily basis. So do not hesitate to browse their websites and find the information you need. You can also contact them always to ask any question that you find relevant. And there is no silly question. Remember, if you want to know something, we are here to help. So if you want to bring your dog with you, you can ask our colleagues. If you have to bring your mother-in-law, you can ask for their support to know the visa, etc. Well, for those of you who already have secured a fellowship, have not secured a fellowship actually, but you are considering a research stay in Europe, you may be looking for a job, right? That's why the first pillar of Euraccess is called Euraccess Jobs. It's an online free of charge database offering career opportunities. In this section, you will find job positions, all relating to science, mainly in Europe, but also worldwide. You will find at the same place funding opportunities, scholarships, grants to support your mobility. But something important in the case today, you can find in this section also hosting offers from institutions that want to receive visiting researchers, for example, under the upcoming MSCA call for postdoctoral fellowship. So if you are considering applying, you can look for institutions who showed interest in hosting you. Well, you can also count on Euraccess to to test your abilities and find training modules for free on the Euraccess career development pillar. And we also help you find partners. For example, if you are looking for institutions or individuals and apply for funding. Last but not least, we already about information and assistance, but Euraccess Worldwide is the international arm of Euraccess. It's where you can find us from Euraccess Brazil and LAC, but also our colleagues all over the world. And I will tell you in a minute more about our activities. But let me stress that if you want to use all the Euraccess functionalities, you can create an account for free, and then you'll be able to publish your CV, you can create alerts, so you receive notification when a job matches your profile. For example, you can look for partners, etc. So Euraccess Worldwide, I'm talking from Brazil and Latin America, where my colleague Victoria and myself are based, but we also have colleagues in China, in Japan, South Korea, India, ASEAN, Australia and New Zealand, North America, and also now in Africa. So you can count on us to receive updated information on open calls, events, opportunities. I would say that most important, we help you understand EU funding and what's in it for you. We provide trainings and useful resources. So this is for the fellows already. We are always happy to work with fellows from our region to speak our language to promote MSCA. And we will certainly invite the fellows today in attendance to share their experience in our events in the future. Well, I invite you to end this presentation to register in our mailing list and follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter, so you don't miss any opportunity and any of our activities. You can always contact us also in writing, and we are at your disposal to support your mobility projects. Ready? I'd like to give the floor to Brian Cahill, who is a former chair of MCAA and now a grant manager at Leibniz Information Center for Science and Technology in Germany.
So this is, I was asked to give this talk about designing a career development plan in the context of Marie Curie individual fellowship. First, I will just mention kind of the work of MCA on kind of researcher careers, and in particular, the Declaration on Sustainable Researcher Careers that was published in 2019 in collaboration with Eurodoc, that worked with many researchers, both within the MCA membership and also the Eurodoc membership, to kind of develop a position on researcher careers and their sustainability. What is a career development plan and why is it important? In some ways, that the career development plan within the individual fellowship is a contractual necessity, but it's also kind of it plays a kind of, it's essential kind of to for the development of the career of the fellows. That if you look at the construction of the proposal itself, that career development is central to the writing of a successful proposal, and many of the elements of the career development plan are contained within the proposals. But kind of the career development plan itself is kind of gives you the opportunity to clarify the details of how you will plan your work during the running of the project, but also kind of how you will kind of integrate training and career development goals. And it's like in politics, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. And somehow at the very beginning of your project, it is good to find the concrete ways that you will support your own career development through your project. It allows you to define your career goals and kind of how your fellowship will help you to reach those goals. Why and when to develop the career development plan. This is kind of the why that you should make by making your career goals clear to yourself. It makes it easier to achieve your goals, but also to get support from others, and in particular your supervisor, but also career development support within the university. And it's good to, if you talk with your supervisor in particular, there are many ways that supervisors can help researchers or kind of junior researchers in their career development. And if you, for example, if you want to stay at the university that you're doing your fellowship in, it's good that your supervisor knows this as early as possible. So I'm kind of, as to when to develop the career development plan, I looked at model contracts for MSCA IF in Germany, and those contracts require the fellow to have completed the plan within the first 6 weeks of the contract. So this is a hard requirement. May not apply to other countries, but this is the recommendation within Germany, is to finish it to have the assigned career development plan within 6 weeks. And a lot of the within the proposal, the research training and networking budget is not discussed in any great detail. And Bronwyn has talked about this, and there have been many questions. And this is something that you can probably find out better once you have started your proposal and you start talking to the people in your institution. And this is in kind of the typical kind of individual fellowship, we're talking about 19,200 euros. And this is all of the headings that Bronwyn described for research training and networking are relevant, and you may you will have to discuss this with your supervisor and with the team in the university, kind of exactly how this money is going to be spent, and whether you can keep your computer at the end of the project and so on. So these are details that are very, very difficult to find out from abroad. And once you move to the country and kind of talk to people face to face, that you become aware of kind of the exact details. So there's a lot of communication with the with the team and within the university and kind of knocking on doors and finding out exactly how it works. So I think within the first 6 weeks of your project, you have a lot of work just to set it up for the coming 2 years. I prepared a kind of a career development plan. I've just put a Google document together. This is a template of a career development plan that has been going around for very many years. I'm not completely sure where it came from, but this is the one that most MSCA ITNs and individual fellowship fellows use. And this is a very, very empty template. I will talk through the headings within the next few slides, but the structure is not set in concrete, that you can set this up exactly how you like, as long as it suits you and suits your supervisor and you both sign off on it. This is the most important thing, but that you set up a career development plan that suits you. If the headings don't suit you, you're fully free to choose something else. That career development is very, very personal. So whereas this career development plan is empty, that you have to fill it up with your needs for your own career development and for your own learning goals. That this is set by your own goals and your context, that you cannot, you can look at what somebody else may have done, but everybody will have a very, very different career development plan, even though the kind of many of the inputs are quite similar. You have to set your own priorities. Just to kind of for project management, that very often people talk about SMART goals, so that they should be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So this is kind of getting from the proposal to the actual project management, that you should set goals that can be achieved within the 2 years, and kind of make sure that the project supports your career development going forward in the long term. For assessing your skills development needs, I can recommend kind of these 3 following methods for skills development assessment. There is a map from the AAAS and Science Careers, where you can enter where you kind of you answer questions in a form, and then from these questions that you can assess your own skills development needs and career development needs and possible careers going forward. This is very oriented towards scientific careers coming from science, and maybe for the social sciences and for the humanities less relevant. Nevertheless, it goes through many of the relevant skills that researchers develop. The Vitae Researcher Development Framework is very well known. It's available from Vitae, which is a career development NGO in the UK. And this allows people to assess the skills that researchers develop. That Eurodoc have developed this infographic on transferable skills. This has been included in Horizon Europe in the MSCA work program as a recommendation for transferable skills assessment. So this lists many of the skills that researchers develop and that researchers may want to kind of receive training in. So I think this is one kind of list that you can look through. And if you see, I would like to pursue training in science for policy making, or I would like to kind of pursue training in entrepreneurship, that you can kind of check out which types of training are available. In the career development plan, that the first heading is long-term career objectives. That's over 5 years. And that it requires you to set your goals. And this is something that you have to kind of look at your own situation and look at your own kind of wishes and dreams, and to try to figure out exactly what sort of career, whether it's an academic career or outside academia. If it is an academic career, how you will develop in kind of looking to achieve your goals, that you can still develop skills that can lead to careers outside academia. And kind of this, as well as your goals, that you're asked to ask what further research activity or other training is needed to attain these goals. So this is kind of what you need to achieve within your within the fellowship and beyond, and which training you would like to take to improve your skills and to improve your knowledge going forward. That the short-term career objectives are more important for within 1 to 2 years, are more important for carrying out the project itself. So many of the headings can be directly related to the content of the proposal. So if the first heading was research results with anticipated publications, anticipated conference, workshop attendance, courses, and or seminar presentations, and many of these sort of research outputs have been kind of listed within your proposal, but kind of between starting your writing your proposal and starting your project, many things may happen. You may have said, I will go to a particular conference, but this conference takes place every 2 years and it falls at the wrong time for your project. In that case, you can choose other conferences. You can choose other publications. You can kind of adapt this career development plan as you go along. So that many of you can add publications or add conferences. So this is what you have from the proposal is important, but it isn't as binding as the career development plan, which will be an agreement between you and your supervisor as to how you will carry out the project. And so under point 2, you have research skills and techniques. So this is training in specific new areas or technical expertise. And this is the research skills that you need to develop into to achieve the goals of the project. And that will be of value to you after the end of the project. Research management is basically kind of how the fellowship, how you plan to apply for other funding or other fellowships. And this is, as you know, that this fellowship is 2 years long. If you want to have funding to continue an academic career after that 2 years, you should start thinking about which funding you will apply for from fairly early on in the project, because very often people reach the end of the project and there is no position to move into. And that's it. Career development isn't something that you start to do after when you're looking for a job. Career development is something you do from the very beginning of the project and continually through your career. So where I think this heading is a little bit is not perfect is that this is very, very focused on academic careers. Many people do want to continue an academic career, but this is not always the case. That's for research management, that it also has kind of naming awards and fellowships and grants written and applied for and received. So it includes many details that particularly with kind of awards, it's very difficult to plan when you're going to get an award. Very often it's a surprise. So there's a certain amount of luck involved in many of these kind of funding proposals. awards and so on. But if you do not apply, you will not receive an award or a grant. So I think you have to plan and to work hard throughout your project and throughout your career to achieve, to receive funding. That you can work, the short-term career objectives is to work on communication skills, because in research and also in non-academic careers, communication skills are very important. So other professional training can be listed, and in particular anticipated networking opportunities. That within your proposals, you've written about kind of networking opportunities and engagement of stakeholders. And very often for your career development, this is essential, because if you move from academia to another career, that very often the people who are most interested with somebody in somebody of your background and your research interests are the stakeholders that you have listed within your proposal. And the project planning requires you to engage such stakeholders. So if you have a kind of research that is focused on an application that may be of interest to industry partners, and you have to engage these industry partners, that these are the people who may employ you. If your stakeholders are NGOs or public administration or policymakers, maybe these are the sort of career direction that you would be interested in taking yourself. So this gives you the opportunity to learn the language of external stakeholders and to present your results to them in more or less the same way that you could it's a preparation for a job interview with such people in years to come, or to apply for work in that direction. Other activities with professional relevance can also be listed. So to start putting together a career development plan, you should start with your proposal. You should assess the use of the research, training and networking budget. This is, as was also mentioned by Branwen, and this is quite central to your planning for the 2 years of your project. You should talk to support services within the institution, career development, research support office, finances, and other parts of the administration. And this is because, as I said earlier, you may not know from coming from a foreign country into a new position that it takes, that you can only find out how things work by asking questions. And this means kind of going around, knocking on doors, telephoning, kind of getting in touch. Of course, at the moment with COVID, kind of physical interaction may be limited, but it's still necessary to kind of acquire support from the people who need to provide you with information. And most importantly, you should talk with your supervisor, because your supervisor is the contact person #1 for your work, and you should present a draft of the career development plan and kind of discuss kind of how the supervisor can support your work within the 2 years, and how you can work together to finish the career development plan. Problems, issues may come up. Many of these problems and issues have been mentioned in the questions and answers. And these are problems that, at least from my work in MCAA, that many of the researchers had problems once their first paycheck came through. And I think, as Branwen said before, this is often, from the point of view of the administration, they are fully correct, whereas the fellow has been expecting to be paid slightly more, particularly in countries like Germany, where I live that the social security contributions can be quite high. And so this eats a lot of the payment for the fellowship. And this is a factor that many people did not know before they start their fellowship. And this creates an emotional problem sometimes because people feel cheated. And this, the administration feel that, that this is something that is completely straightforward. So this sort of disconnect can cause a certain amount of mistrust. And I think mostly this is something that you have to work through by being as yeah, but you should have some understanding for the administration. Mostly they just doing their job, and it's this is part of, it's a 2-year fellowship, and to some extent this is something that that I don't think that the administration has tried to cheat the researcher, but you have to deal with it and to be as clear as possible from as early as possible in the process. I think first I have a role play. This is something that probably isn't suited to this kind of webinar format, but for workshop it would be. But if you can imagine that you want to set up a career development plan with your supervisor and you ask for advice on how to do that. In your project, you will work very closely with a company and you would like to learn more about intellectual property and how this is handled in terms of ownership of IP, protection of IP, and valorization. You think that you would like to pursue courses on IP management and entrepreneurship, and you would like to include this in your CDP. Your supervisor sees the career development plan as a regular administrative issue, and that is required by the EU. And he believes that it serves no direct value for your activities or for the project. You already have templates, or he already has templates from previous research projects, and he would like to use these to get over this task is in the most efficient way as possible, as quickly as possible. He believes that IP issues shouldn't be handled by the fellows, and there is a dedicated IT department within the university that does this job. And that the fellow should focus on the project, as the 2 years of the project lifetime are very limited. This is, I think, is kind of a way of looking at that. For the researcher, they can see this career development plan as something to that is focused on the career development, and kind of on an administrative level, it's something that is required by the EU and by your project. I think in this case, the supervisor is not completely right, but that you may kind of, I would recommend in this case to focus more on entrepreneurship than IP. Because if you focus on entrepreneurship in a more general term, you focus on communication and wider transferable skills, whereas focusing on IP, on patenting and so on, is a very technical level of focus. And so I think you can work with your supervisor. I would suggest to do some courses in entrepreneurship, which focus more generally on how to develop a mindset to work in industry or in a startup. So I think you can suggest, you can work with your supervisor and listen, but also suggest, sometimes the supervisor can be wrong, but sometimes the supervisor can be right. You should work and kind of discuss, suggest, and ask for the experience of others outside as well. That you should monitor the career development plan, and there will be kind of frequent changes to the details, because it's always very, very common that you will come across a conference that you hadn't considered. And if there is budget available, you should can submit an abstract and maybe it will be accepted and hopefully you'll present it there. So you shouldn't, this isn't a process that's set in stone. An opportunity may become available to visit a course, for example, by the Marie Curie Alumni Association that you did not know was going to be held before you started your project or in the first months. So there's a certain amount of flexibility. You should also focus on your own mental well-being, and kind of that's within research. There's a lot of stress, and particularly with deadlines, reviews, and so on. And if you feel that you are under too much stress, you should intervene early, and you should discuss with your PI, maybe take a break. And I think very often in research, we put ourselves under very much pressure. I mean, so I think this is something that that you should monitor your own mental well-being throughout your work, and kind of look after yourself as much as possible.
Brian, 2 minutes left.
2 minutes, good. If you need help, you can ask your supervisor, institutional services, project manager, ombudsperson. You should take training in transferable skills. I'm working on the researcher mental health cost action, and this is where we kind of develop a conceptual framework tailored to academia in kind of assessing the mental health of researchers. If you have any questions, please enter them in the questions and answers. And I was very glad to talk to you today, and look forward to seeing your questions.
Thank you very much, Brian. You also have already questions awaiting for you in the Q&A section. I will now turn to Donata Iandolo from the board of the Marie Curie Alumni Association. Thank you, Donata. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, I mean, it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. I was once a Marie Curie fellow, and that's actually how I entered the Marie Curie Alumni Association. So I thought I would give you a brief background about the association, which was founded in 2012 and counts now more than 19,000 members. The association is funded by the European Commission, and more specifically by the Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. So the main aim, has already been reminded, I mean, like during the previous talks of the association, and thank you actually for giving already some ideas about what the association is useful for, is to really to connect researchers, but also to provide a network for all the members of the association. Also, of course, I mean, like as it was reminded before, all the researchers, PhD students, but also postdoc that have been awarded a Marie Skłodowska-Curie fellowship, or has been indeed funded by under a Marie Curie action, are eligible to join the association. And I know that Brian has already shared the link to register as for the association, but I will give it also in my slides that will be shared with you, I think, later on today, I guess. So, of course, I mean, I mentioned the fact that, I mean, like the MCAA can provide you with a network. And I mean, these figures are only to remind you that, I mean, like we cover, we have members from a variety of scientific panels, which means also that you are able to connect with members that might, with whom you can collaborate, and maybe you might find new collaborators for future applications. But also we cover a number of, we gather people from various different nationalities and living in various different countries. And as Bronwyn reminded before, it is important also maybe to use the association as a first step, I mean, to get to know the country, but also to have, let's say, a starting family if you're moving to a new country. And having done it myself, I think it's really important to move the first step in a new, maybe very far away country, and maybe also very different from your culture. So I give you a brief overview of the structure, which is, so I forgot to mention it, I'm an ordinary board member of the association, and the association is indeed structured in different chapters and working groups. And I think it's very important that you bear this in mind, because it means that, I mean, like, we cover not only, so it's basically, I mean, like, these are all people that are sharing the same experience that you will be experiencing. And also, if you want to actively contribute to the activities of the association, you can enroll in one or in multiple working groups. And indeed, the association pivots, or the activities of the association pivots around few pillars, like, I mean, of course, I mentioned the networking, but also, I mean, like, as Brian has already mentioned, I mean, career development, but also there are a number of activities organized around science policy, science communication, and also innovation. So in the few minutes that I have, I just want to briefly give you an overview of the benefits that being a member of the association can bring you. Of course, I mean, like, you can connect with people from different backgrounds and different countries, and there is one annual opportunity, sorry, there is a misspell, during the annual conference that this year has been run online, but also there are a number of training opportunities that are offered by the board, but also organized by the different chapters and working groups. And these can be, I mean, like, on sustainable researcher careers, as Brian has already suggested, but also on transferable skills. Also, we have micro grants that you, as a member of this association, can apply for, and you have the link so that you can go and have a better idea of, like, what these grants can actually fund. And also, I just want to, as a last point, I want to remind you the mentoring opportunities that we offer within the association for our members. There is a program that is already running that is called the Referent Initiative, that is mostly focused on mental health. And as Brian has already mentioned, indeed, this is a key important topic within the association, especially because we are all moving around, like, maybe detaching from our families or living in very stressful moments. So it's important to find a mentee, or maybe share your experience as a mentor. And also, we are now launching where we are revamping the academy. So bear with us. I know that some or many of the MCA of the fellows has already registered for the academy, but we are revamping this initiative, and you will hear more about this in the coming months. So with this, it's all from my side. Yeah, I thank you for your attention, and yeah, if you have any question, you can contact us, you can follow us, or indeed you can send an email to the email link that I added to my slides. And with this, it's all from my side.
Thank you very much, Donata. We will now hear about researchers that are either based in Latin America or from Latin America, but in Europe, about their experiences as MSA individual fellows. We will split it into rooms. That's why I would like to thank our 4 presenters today for their time and expertise. I'm sure it was very useful for the audience. And I also thank you for participating in this event and tuning in. So you can see the the agenda on your screen. We will split into 2 rooms. In room 1, called European Fellowships, is for fellows who have either moving countries in Europe or moving to Europe from another continent. Room 2 is for researchers who want a global fellowship, meaning that they will perform their research, their mobility in a non-European country, and then go back to Europe. So for prospective candidates, you choose room 2 if you are now based in Europe and want to undertake a stay in Latin America and the Caribbean or in any other continent outside of Europe.